In the far reaches of the galaxy, stories traveled faster than ships. Traders whispered them in spaceports, mercenaries carried them across star systems, and frightened refugees told them in broken voices. They all spoke of one thing: a human warship. Some claimed it was larger than a city, with black armor that swallowed the light of nearby stars. Others swore it had no crew at all, only a living machine guided by the will of humankind. Many dismissed the tales as rumors, the kind of wild stories people told to pass time during long journeys. Yet, the more the story spread, the harder it became to ignore. On the mining world of Cathar, a drunken freighter captain insisted he had seen it with his own eyes. He described how it slipped out of hyperspace without warning, silent and still, and how an entire pirate fleet vanished after firing upon it. No wreckage remained, only empty space where dozens of ships had once been. His listeners laughed, shaking their heads, but not one of them could meet his eyes for long. Even laughter could not fully drown out the seed of fear planted in their hearts. In the crowded markets of Arlith Station, merchants swore they had lost entire caravans to an invisible hunter. Their escorts never returned, their ships never arrived, and the last transmission carried only static. The survivors whispered that it was the human warship, testing its weapons in secret. Some merchants refused to travel alone after hearing these stories, doubling their escorts despite the cost. Fear made them cautious, and profit was no longer the only thing that mattered. The rulers of the Drakar Dominion, a vast alien empire, laughed the loudest at these rumors. To them, humans were a small species on the edge of the galaxy, known for stubbornness but not for power. The Drakar had crushed fleets of larger, older civilizations. What could one warship do against an empire that stretched across hundreds of star systems? Still, the stories refused to die. Even among Drakar soldiers, whispers grew in the dark corners of barracks and mess halls. They joked about it during the day, but in the quiet of night, their voices grew low, as if afraid the ship might hear them. On the frontier worlds, colonists prayed the stories were true. They lived under the shadow of alien warlords who demanded tribute and punished resistance with fire. To them, the idea of a human warship roaming the stars, striking fear into oppressors, was not terrifying, but hopeful. They imagined it coming to their rescue, a silent guardian in the void. Hope and fear mixed together until no one knew which was stronger. The mystery only deepened when strange readings appeared on long-range sensors in neutral space. Patrol ships sent to investigate returned shaken, their crews unwilling to speak of what they saw. Some resigned from service the very next day, claiming they would never fly again. Commanders tried to suppress the reports, but word leaked out. The unknown became the most frightening detail of all. Travelers told of a presence, a feeling that crept over them when the warship was near. They described silence in the comms, shadows moving across the stars, and a cold weight pressing against their minds. None could explain it, and those who experienced it never forgot. Scientists tried to dismiss it as fear and imagination, yet their voices carried little weight against the growing tide of rumor. Everywhere, the story twisted into new shapes. Some said the ship was built from the bones of fallen moons. Others claimed it carried the spirits of dead human soldiers, bound together in eternal rage. A few even argued that it was not human at all, but a weapon humans had found and awakened. With every retelling, the warship became larger, darker, and more impossible. But no matter how strange the versions became, one detail never changed. Wherever it appeared, nothing survived. On the planet Veyrun, a council of alien leaders debated the truth of these stories. They had fought against humans before and had always considered them reckless but predictable. Yet now, unease filled their chambers. A merchant had brought a recording said to be from a destroyed fleet. The grainy image showed a shape slipping from hyperspace, blacker than the void, jagged like a blade. Weapons fire lit the screen, then darkness swallowed it. The recording cut to silence. Some claimed it was a forgery, a trick by human spies. Others looked at it with pale faces, unable to speak. For the common people of the galaxy, the warship became something more than rumor. It became a ghost story, a tale told to frighten children into obedience. Parents warned their young ones not to wander too far, lest the human warship find them. Bards and storytellers wove it into their songs, and even soldiers began to mark their armor with human symbols, hoping the ghost ship would pass them by. Through all the whispers, one truth remained. No one had proof. There were no official records, no surviving witnesses who could confirm everything. And yet, the more people tried to disprove it, the more the legend grew. Rumor was more powerful than fact, and the galaxy was ready to believe. In the silence of space, unseen by those who argued over its existence, a great shadow moved. Its hull reflected nothing. Its weapons glowed with restrained fury. Whether born from human hands or something far older, it carried the will of humanity across the stars. Every rumor carried a piece of truth, and every whisper carried fear. The galaxy might not believe in it fully, but the warship did not need belief. It was real, and it was coming. The Drakkar dominions stretched across hundreds of star systems. Their fleets moved like storms through the galaxy, crushing worlds, enslaving populations, and leaving behind fear wherever they went. For generations, no one had dared to challenge their power. Their ships were vast, their armies endless, and their commanders ruthless. Whenever whispers of rebellion rose, the Drakkar crushed it before it could even grow. To them, war was not survival. It was a sport. In their High Council chamber, located on the burning world of Karvoth, the Drakkar leaders gathered. They had heard the rumors of the human warship, carried to them through merchants, prisoners, and frightened allies. The chamber was lit by blue flames that flickered across the black stone walls. Tall alien generals, their scaled faces sharp with pride, stood in a circle around the war table. On the table, holograms of their fleets floated in the air, glowing like stars. The talk of the warship had reached even them, but they laughed as if it were nothing more than a ghost story. One general with golden armor struck the table with his claw. He declared that humans were weak, a species known for loud talk and reckless actions. He reminded the others of battles where human fleets had been scattered like dust. According to him, a single warship could not stand against the Dominion's endless armada. His words brought nods and laughter from many in the room. Yet not all of them laughed. A younger commander, scars running across his cheek, spoke with caution. He reminded them that fear did not spread without reason. Across dozens of systems, the same story had been told, the same details repeated again and again. Could all those witnesses be wrong? Could all those vanished fleets be explained away as lies? His words fell heavy in the chamber, but the older generals dismissed him quickly. Fear, they said, was a weapon humans used to weaken stronger foes. Still, pride did not blind them completely. Even if they mocked the story, they could not ignore it. The council ordered preparations. Across the Dominion, fleets were summoned, soldiers armed, and war engines awakened from their slumber. Every ship in range of the Veyron system was commanded to converge there. The Drakkar wanted a display of power, a wall of steel and fire that would crush whatever came their way, human or not. On the training fields of Karvoth, soldiers drilled with renewed intensity. They spoke in low voices when their commanders were not near, sharing the rumors they had heard. Some said the warship could not be seen by sensors, that it appeared only when it chose. Others whispered it carried weapons that split planets in half. Many scoffed at these tales, but even scoffing could not hide the unease in their eyes. Fear grew in silence, and silence followed them even into the barracks. In orbit around the Dominion's central worlds, fleets formed ranks. Dreadnoughts, each one a moving fortress, stood beside sleek cruisers armed with plasma cannons. Thousands of fighters waited within hangars, engines humming like restless beasts. The admirals, proud in their black and crimson uniforms, boasted that their combined power could defeat entire civilizations. If the human warship was real, they said, it would find only death waiting for it. The Dominion's emperor, seated on a throne carved from the bones of conquered species, watched these preparations with cold amusement. To him, humans were insects buzzing too loudly in the dark. Yet, in the corner of his mind, the thought of the rumors lingered. He gave one command. Should the warship appear, it was not to be destroyed immediately. Instead, he wanted it crippled, captured, and displayed across the galaxy. A broken human weapon, paraded before billions, would remind everyone of the Dominion's unshakable rule. As the fleets gathered, the skies of the Veyron system darkened with warships. From the surface of its planets, people looked up and saw the heavens filled with Drakkar steel. To them, it was both terrifying and suffocating. The Dominion had chosen their system as the stage for its next show of strength. Entire populations were forced to work day and night to supply the incoming armadas. The air filled with the thunder of engines, the ground trembled as heavy machines marched through cities, and the stars themselves seemed swallowed by the shadows of ships. Among the common soldiers, jokes turned into nervous laughter. They spoke of how easy the battle would be, how quickly the humans would be erased. Yet when night fell and the barracks grew quiet, some could not sleep. They thought of the vanished fleets, of the strange recordings, of the silence that followed every story of the warship. No one said it aloud, but a question haunted them all. What if the rumors were true? The Drakkar High Command prepared as if for any other war. Strategies were drawn, formations decided, and weapons primed. They expected a fight, but not a real challenge. Their fleets were used to winning, their commanders were used to victory. To them, the coming battle would be nothing more than another step in the Dominion's endless march across the galaxy. But far beyond their reach, in the endless dark of space, a shadow moved closer. Silent and patient, it was already watching them. While the Drakkar laughed and armed themselves, the warship approached, its black hull invisible against the stars. And though they believed themselves ready, they had no idea what awaited them when humanity's fury finally arrived. The void of space near the Veyron system was silent. Fleets of the Drakkar Dominion floated in perfect formation, their ships shining with weapons ready to fire. Dreadnoughts the size of mountains drifted like dark gods among smaller cruisers and destroyers. Thousands of fighters waited inside hangars, pilots strapped into their cockpits with steady hands, though many of those hands trembled slightly when no one was watching. The Drakkar commanders stared at their screens, waiting for the signal, waiting for proof that the human warship was real. Then the signal came. At first, it was only a flicker on the long-range sensors, a reading so faint that officers thought it was an error. But the flicker grew stronger, sharper, until alarms echoed through every ship in the Dominion's fleet. The admirals leaned forward in their command chairs, eyes narrowing as the black shape emerged from hyperspace. It was unlike anything they had seen before. The human warship did not blaze with lights or paint itself in the colors of pride. It came in silence, a shadow sliding from the fabric of space itself. Its hull was blacker than the void, jagged edges cutting sharp lines against the stars. It looked less like a ship and more like a predator, something built not just to fight but to terrify. Even the strongest captains in the Dominion felt their scales crawl when they saw it. The Drakkar attempted to open communications. A signal was sent across the void, sharp and commanding, "Identify yourself or be destroyed." The warship did not reply. Another signal was sent, filled with threats, promises of torture, and reminders of the Dominion's power. Still, the ship remained silent. Not even static returned. The silence itself became an answer, heavier than words, pressing against the minds of every soldier who saw it. Inside the alien command decks, unease grew. Soldiers whispered to one another that the rumors might have been true. The generals shouted for silence, their voices echoing across the chambers. They ordered their fleets to prepare weapons, to close in, to show the humans what it meant to challenge the Dominion. Yet even as they barked orders, their eyes betrayed their fear. The warship drifted closer, its movements slow and deliberate, as if it had all the time in the universe. It did not rush, did not fire, did not even power up weapons that the sensors could detect. It simply moved, and its movement alone made thousands of trained soldiers shift uncomfortably in their seats. It was as if the ship knew it was already in control, and the Dominion's massive fleets were nothing but prey. One captain, braver than the rest, gave a command to fire a warning shot. A beam of plasma streaked across space and struck the warship's hull. Instead of burning or cracking, the beam bent, as though swallowed by the black surface. The energy vanished without leaving a mark. Gasps spread through the command decks as data screens confirmed what everyone saw. The shot had done nothing. That was when fear turned to panic. More captains ordered their ships to fire, desperate to prove the human warship could be hurt. Cannons unleashed glowing spheres of plasma, railguns spat molten slugs, and torpedoes cut across the void. Thousands of weapons lit the darkness, bright enough to blind the sensors. Explosions rippled across the warship's shadow, waves of fire rolling across its hull. For a brief moment, some of the Dominion soldiers cheered, believing the rumors false at last. But as the light faded, the truth was revealed. The warship remained. Its black armor shimmered faintly as if the stars themselves bent around it. Not a single mark scarred its surface. Every weapon, every blast, every missile had vanished against its shield. The cheers died instantly, replaced by silence more suffocating than before. The warship did not answer the attack with words. Instead, a low hum began to vibrate through the fabric of space. It was not heard by ears, but felt by bones. The Dominion's ships trembled as the warship powered its weapons. Lights ran across its jagged edges like veins of fire, and the hum grew into a roar that every soldier felt in their chest. They were not just watching a ship. They were staring into the fury of humanity itself. The admirals shouted for calm, commanding their fleets to hold formation. But calm was impossible. The sight of the black warship alone had shaken the Dominion's confidence, and the silence had cracked their pride. The crews of smaller ships began to mutter prayers, some to their gods, others to no one at all. They could not understand how one vessel could carry such presence, how it could make their mighty armada feel small. In that moment, the Dominion realized something terrible. They had prepared for a battle of strength, expecting to crush a ship with overwhelming numbers. But the warship was not fighting with strength alone. It fought with fear. It had already taken hold of their hearts before firing a single shot. The Dominion's fleets were still intact, but their courage was already breaking. And then, without warning, the warship shifted its weapons into position. No words were spoken, no threats were made. The silence ended not with communication, but with fire. The silence broke with a flash that split the void. From the human warship, a single beam of light burst forward, sharp and blinding, cutting through the darkness like the strike of a blade. It crossed the distance in less than a heartbeat and tore through 3 Dominion cruisers as if they were made of glass. One moment they floated proud and armed, the next they were nothing but fragments scattering into the endless black. The explosion lit the fleet sled, and the shockwave rippled across thousands of sensors at once. Panic spread like fire. Drakkar officers shouted commands, voices rising in fear as their screens filled with red warnings. Crews scrambled to adjust shields, to target weapons, to bring their massive fleet into order. But the warship did not wait. It moved again, slow and deliberate, and another beam lanced through the formation, carving ships apart before they could even react. The Dominion's admirals roared in anger, ordering a full barrage. In that instant, the entire armada opened fire. Plasma cannons flared, railguns thundered, and torpedoes streaked across the void. Thousands of weapons from thousands of ships lighting the system brighter than a star. The combined fury of the Dominion struck the warship in a storm of fire and energy. For long moments, the human ship was hidden by the glare, swallowed by explosions so vast they blinded even the battle monitors. For the first time, hope flickered among the Dominion crews. They shouted that it was over, that nothing could survive such firepower. Captains laughed harshly, soldiers pounded consoles, convinced that the legend had been destroyed before their eyes. But the light faded, and when it cleared, the truth made their laughter choke in their throats. The human warship was still there. Its black hull shimmered faintly, bending the light of nearby stars. The shields had drunk in every blast, every torpedo, every round of molten metal. It had not moved, had not been shaken, not even scratched. Against the fury of an entire empire's fleet, the warship had simply stood still, as if mocking them. The silence that followed was heavier than any explosion. Soldiers stared at their screens in disbelief, and a terrible realization spread. Their weapons meant nothing. Then the warship struck back. This time it did not fire only one beam. Lines of energy lit across its jagged surface, glowing red like veins of lava. A volley erupted, beams slashing across the battlefield in perfect arcs. Each strike was clean, precise, and devastating. Dominion ships exploded one after another, their shields collapsing like thin glass. Entire squadrons vanished in seconds, their remains spinning helplessly through space. The Dominion's formations broke as captains panicked. Some tried to retreat, engines flaring as they turned away. Others pressed forward desperately, hoping to close the distance and overwhelm the human warship at close range. But the warship seemed to anticipate every move. It targeted command ships first, cutting down flagships and silencing admirals before they could reorganize their fleets. The Dominion's strength was their discipline, their ability to fight as one. In minutes, the warship shredded that strength apart, leaving only chaos. The Dominion soldiers tried everything. They launched waves of fighters, thousands of small craft screaming toward the warship with torpedoes armed. But as they neared, the warship unleashed something new. Small bursts of light shot out, faster than sight, and each fighter was torn apart before reaching its target. The space around the warship became a graveyard of shattered wings and burning engines. Still, the Dominion fought. Pride would not let them surrender. Their dreadnoughts, the pride of the Empire, surged forward with heavy guns glowing. They fired together, their beams converging into a single point. The blast could have cracked a moon in half. But the warship twisted its shield, bending the attack aside as if it were no more than wind. Then it answered with a single shot that pierced the lead dreadnought from bow to stern. The ship split into two flaming halves, and the shockwaves consumed those that followed. Fear took root in the hearts of even the bravest. The crews of smaller vessels began to break formation, fleeing into the dark in hopes of escape. Admirals screamed at them to hold their ground, threatening them with execution, but no voice of command could silence the terror that gripped them. The legend of the warship was no longer rumor. It was real, and it was slaughtering them. The battlefield became a storm of fire and debris. Ships collided as they tried to retreat, torpedoes detonated without targets, and entire squadrons were swallowed by panic. The warship glided through the chaos with cold precision, every strike cutting exactly where it hurt most. It did not waste a shot, did not hesitate, did not relent. To the Dominion, it was as death itself had taken form in the shape of human steel. In the command chamber of the Dominion's High Admiral, silence fell. He stared at the wreckage on his screens, his claws trembling, though he forced them still. Around him, officers worked in panic, their eyes wide with the same fear they tried to hide. The Admiral realized the truth in that moment. This was not a battle. This was an execution. The warship had come not just to fight, but to break the Dominion's spirit, to show them they were not invincible. Across the galaxy, as news of the battle spread through hidden transmissions, worlds long crushed under Dominion rule watched in awe. They saw that even the greatest empire could bleed. They saw that the human warship, silent and merciless, was real. And for the first time in generations, hope began to grow in the hearts of the oppressed. But for the Dominion, hope was a word that no longer belonged to them. As their fleets burned and their soldiers screamed in terror, the only word that remained in their hearts was fear. And the warship, still silent, pressed forward, ready to finish what it had begun. The Dominion fleets had never faced such terror. Their numbers were vast, their weapons unmatched in the galaxy, yet against the human warship, they were nothing more than prey. Still, they were not ready to surrender. Pride and desperation pushed them forward. Admirals screamed into comms, demanding new strategies, urging their captains to adapt. They told themselves there had to be a weakness. No ship, human or otherwise, could be truly invincible. Orders rippled through the broken formations. Squadrons were regrouped. Surviving dreadnoughts moved to flank the warship from opposite sides, while cruisers swarmed to distract it. Destroyers lit the void with decoy flares, trying to confuse its targeting systems. The Dominion had fought countless wars, and they had survived by using not just power, but cunning. If brute force could not bring the warship down, then perhaps strategy would. For a moment, it seemed to work. Waves of cruisers darted around the warship, releasing clouds of sensor-jamming particles. The black ship vanished from scanners, its outline blurred among false signals. Torpedo swarms closed in, hundreds of warheads glowing bright as they streaked through space. They converged on the warship in a perfect storm, filling the darkness with detonations. The blasts shook nearby ships, and debris scattered across the battlefield. Soldiers cheered, believing they had finally overwhelmed it. But as the light cleared, the cheers died in their throats. The warship emerged from the fire unharmed, its shield bending the explosions away. Slowly, deliberately, its cannons turned. The Dominion's trap had failed. With deadly calm, the warship began dismantling their strategy piece by piece. It targeted the jamming cruisers first, beams slicing through them like blades through paper. Without their interference, the ship became visible once more, its black hull gleaming faintly against the light of burning wrecks. Next, it struck the destroyers that carried the decoys, obliterating them in quick succession. Within minutes, the careful plan the Dominion had built collapsed under the warship's precision. The Dominion commanders grew more desperate. They sent orders for ramming runs. Smaller ships, their captains screaming battle cries, ignited engines to full and hurled themselves at the warship in suicidal charges. They believed that if they could not destroy it with weapons, perhaps they could smash its shields with sheer force. One by one, the ships struck, exploding in bursts of fire and metal. But the warship did not even tremble. The impacts vanished against its barrier, leaving only wreckage spinning into the void. Watching this, fear began to infect the admirals themselves. The warship was not just surviving, it was learning. Each time they tried something new, it countered faster, more efficiently. Every maneuver they invented, the warship anticipated. It fought like it could read their thoughts, like it had studied the Dominion's playbook and found every weakness in it. For the first time in their long history of conquest, the Drakkar Dominion realized they were the ones being outsmarted. Yet still, they fought. Squadrons of fighters swarmed like hornets, trying to overwhelm the warship from every angle. Thousands of small ships filled the space around it, streaking across the void in tight formations. For a moment, they blocked its sight, darkening its view with a swarm of living machines. But the warship unleashed something the Dominion had never seen. Its hull shimmered, and a pulse rippled outward, invisible but deadly. In an instant, every fighter was torn apart, their engines cut, their wings ripped to pieces. The swarm vanished as quickly as it had come, leaving silence behind. Panic deepened among the fleets. Captains shouted conflicting orders, some demanding retreat, others calling for reckless charges. Ships collided as formations broke apart. Discipline, the Dominion's greatest strength, crumbled in the face of the human warship. The admirals tried to restore order, but their voices were drowned out by the chaos of screaming crews and dying ships. The warship did not rush its attack. It moved with patience, striking where it hurt most. It disabled command vessels, silenced communication hubs, and destroyed fuel carriers that supplied the fleets. Every decision was precise, every target chosen to maximize despair. To the Dominion, it felt less like they were fighting a ship and more like they were being hunted by a predator that understood fear as well as war. On the surface of Veyron's planets, billions watched the battle unfold through transmissions. Entire populations, long crushed under Dominion rule, held their breath. They saw the invincible empire flailing against a single human warship. For the first time in generations, they saw weakness in their masters. Whispers spread among them, soft but powerful. If the Dominion could be broken here, then perhaps they'd be broken everywhere. The Dominion's leaders realized the danger. The battle was not only about fleets and firepower, it was about control of the galaxy's belief. If the warship won, the legend would spread and rebellion would follow. The Empire could not afford to lose. With a final desperate order, the High Admiral commanded every remaining ship to focus fire, no matter the cost. Dreadnoughts, cruisers, and destroyers aligned their weapons, charging them to their fullest. The space lit up as they unleashed everything at once. A final storm of fire meant to bury the warship in overwhelming destruction. The void burned bright as a sun. The blasts converged on the warship, shaking the very space around it. The admirals leaned forward, claws gripping their thrones, praying that this time the ship would fall. For long moments, nothing could be seen but light and fire. The Dominion soldiers dared to hope. Then the light faded. The warship still floated there, silent and untouched. Its shields glowed faintly, like a veil of fire around its hull. Slowly, its cannons began to hum with energy. The Dominion's final effort had failed, and they knew in their hearts what would come next. The human warship had allowed them to try everything, to throw their full strength against it. And now, with their pride broken and their strategies shattered, it was ready to end the battle. The warship's weapons glowed brighter as silence spread across the battlefield. The Dominion's last desperate strike had failed, and now every soldier, captain, and admiral felt the weight of what was coming. No one spoke for a moment. The only sound inside their ships was the sharp beeping of alarms and the steady hum of engines straining under panic-driven commands. Out in the void, the human warship moved with the patience of a hunter ready to deliver the killing blow. Its first strike came without warning. A single beam shot out and pierced the Dominion's flagship, the heart of their command structure. The massive dreadnought had been guarded by layers of cruisers and destroyers, but the warship cut through them all in one smooth motion. The dreadnought's hull split open, flames escaping into space before the ship exploded in a blinding burst. The blast rocked the fleets, and with it, the last anchor of leadership was gone. The admirals who survived screamed for their forces to regroup, but the voices that carried authority were fewer now, and fear drowned out their words. Across the fleets, panic began to swallow discipline. Ships broke formation, some trying to flee, others charging blindly at the warship as if rage could cover their terror. But every move seemed pointless. Wherever they ran, the warship was waiting. Wherever they fought, its weapons struck faster, sharper, with deadly precision. In one sector, a squadron of Dominion destroyers attempted a coordinated maneuver. They formed a spearhead, rushing the warship at full speed, their weapons blazing. For a moment, the space around them glowed with fire, their determination pushing them forward. But the warship rotated smoothly, and with one pulse, its cannons swept across them. All 6 destroyers vanished in synchronized explosions, their debris scattering like dust. Elsewhere, a group of smaller frigates tried to hide in the wreckage of fallen ships. They hoped the warship would focus on larger targets and overlook them. But the warship's sensors, or perhaps its instinct, did not allow anything to slip by. Its beams cut through the graveyard of ships, igniting the frigates one by one. Each explosion lit the twisted hulks of wrecks already floating in silence, turning the battlefield into a burning field of broken steel. The Dominion's soldiers, once proud and fearless, now felt the truth pressing into their hearts. This was no ordinary battle. It was a lesson. Every tactic they had trusted, every strategy they had perfected, was useless here. The warship knew their strengths and turned them into weaknesses. It was not just killing them, it was breaking their spirit. From the planets below, billions of enslaved eyes watched. The transmissions broadcast the chaos across entire systems. They saw the Dominion's dreadnoughts burn, their cruisers fall, and their fighters vanish in waves of fire. The human warship became more than a machine in their eyes. It became a symbol. To those who lived under chains, it was hope in its purest form. To those who ruled with fear, it was a nightmare given shape. Inside the Dominion fleets, desperation turned to madness. Some captains tried to retreat into hyperspace, but the warship anticipated them. It fired at their engines with perfect precision, disabling them before they could jump. The ships were left stranded, helpless in the middle of the battlefield, waiting for destruction. Others turned their weapons on their own allies, blaming commanders for their failures, their discipline shattered completely. The proud Dominion war machine had become a chaotic storm of fear and betrayal. Then came the moment that shifted everything. The warship launched a weapon none of them had seen before, a sphere of light detached from its hull, floating silently for a second before releasing a pulse. The pulse rippled outward, invisible but unstoppable. Dominion ships trembled, their shields collapsing all at once. Systems went dark, engines flickered, weapons died in silence. In that instant, the Empire's mighty fleet was reduced to drifting husks. Only emergency lights flickered across their decks, and the crews inside stared in horror at powerless consoles. The warship moved among them like a shadow passing through fire. It did not destroy them all at once. Instead, it struck piece by piece, disabling ships, shattering hulls, and leaving survivors to watch helplessly. The Dominion soldiers realized this was worse than death. To die quickly would have been mercy. Instead, the warship wanted them to see, to understand how small they truly were. On the Dominion's high command vessel, the surviving admiral collapsed into his chair. His claws trembled as he stared at the burning wreckage across the stars. He could no longer pretend this was just a ship. It was something greater, something that carried the will of humanity itself. With a broken voice, he whispered what none of his people dared to admit. The Dominion was losing. The turning point was complete. The warship had not just shattered fleets, it had shattered belief. The Dominion, once the most feared empire in the galaxy, was no longer untouchable. Every soldier could feel it in their bones. Their empire was bleeding, and the legend of human power was rising in its place. The warship did not slow. Its cannons hummed, its shields burned, and it pressed forward through the silence of space, leaving only fire and ruin in its wake. And the galaxy, watching from the shadows, understood that nothing would ever be the same again. The battlefield lay in ruins. Wreckage floated in every direction, the remains of ships that once carried the pride of the Dominion. Fires burned even in the vacuum of space, fueled by broken reactors and torn engines. Bodies drifted silently, their armor reflecting the light of distant stars. The once unbreakable fleet had been reduced to nothing more than shattered steel and silence. Hours had passed since the first strike, and the outcome was clear. The Dominion had thrown everything into the fight: dreadnoughts, cruisers, fighters, and even desperate suicide runs. None of it had worked. The human warship had endured it all, standing unshaken while an empire's might fell around it. Now only scattered survivors remained, powerless ships drifting in fear, unable to move or fight. Across the galaxy, the transmission of the battle spread faster than light. Worlds that had once bowed to the Dominion's rule stopped in their tracks to watch. Farmers on distant colonies, miners in asteroid belts, prisoners in Dominion camps, all saw the same image. A single black warship moving calmly through the ruins of the most feared fleet in the galaxy. For the first time in generations, the galaxy saw proof that the Dominion could bleed. And once that truth was seen, it could never be forgotten. The warship's silence ended at last. For hours, it had fought without a single word, letting its weapons speak. Now, its voice filled the comms of every ship, every station, and every world within reach. The voice was deep, steady, and human. It carried no anger, no desperation, only cold certainty. "This is humanity," the voice declared. "We come for those who enslave, those who destroy, those who rule with fear. Your empires will not last, your chains will break. Brace yourselves, because nothing unjust will survive." The words echoed across every Dominion vessel. On some ships, soldiers collapsed into their seats, their courage drained away. On others, commanders smashed their consoles in rage, refusing to believe what they had heard. But no denial could erase the truth. The warship had spoken, and the galaxy had listened. On planets long ruled by Dominion claws, whispers spread through the streets. Slaves looked at one another with wide eyes. Could this be the beginning of freedom? Could the empire that had crushed them finally fall? In secret corners, rebels raised their heads, daring to hope again. Children asked their parents about the black ship, their voices filled with wonder. Hope, once buried, returned like fire in the dark. Inside the Dominion's surviving command ships, fear turned into arguments. Admirals shouted over one another, blaming their failures on spies, on cowardly captains, on anything but the truth. Yet beneath their fury, they all knew. It was not weakness in their soldiers that had doomed them. It was the strength of humanity, a strength they had underestimated until it was too late. The warship did not finish every vessel. Some were left drifting, their engines dead, their weapons silent. It was a message. Mercy was rare in war, but leaving survivors meant one thing: the story would spread. Those who had seen the warship with their own eyes would carry the fear with them, and fear was stronger than any weapon. Across the ruins, the warship drifted slowly, scanning for stragglers. It ignored the cries for surrender, ignored the desperate signals begging for mercy. It did not need to answer. Its message had already been given. Each ship left alive was another voice that would carry the legend farther. The Dominion had tried to bury the rumors, but now those rumors were alive in every corner of the galaxy, turned into undeniable truth. In the capital of the Dominion, news of the defeat arrived like a storm. The Emperor himself stared at the reports, his claws digging into the throne. For the first time in his reign, he felt doubt. His empire had stood for centuries, feared by all, unchallenged by any. Yet in one battle, a single human warship had undone what thousands of fleets had built. Rage filled him, but rage could not erase the truth spreading across the galaxy. His empire was no longer untouchable. Meanwhile, in hidden colonies where humans had settled far from the core worlds, celebrations broke out. Families cheered as they heard the transmission. Soldiers who had once felt forgotten by their own people raised their fists in pride. Humanity, long dismissed as weak by alien empires, had shown its true strength. Not through numbers, but through will. Not through endless fleets, but through one warship that refused to bow. The warship itself moved away from the battlefield at last. Its engines hummed quietly as it vanished back into hyperspace, leaving behind only ruins and silence. To those who survived, it felt as if a storm had passed, leaving them broken in its wake. To those who watched from afar, it felt like the dawn of something new. Legends are not born in peace, they are forged in fire, and this legend had now been carved into the stars. From that day forward, the Dominion's enemies would whisper of the human warship. Children would repeat its warning in their games. Rebels would paint its shape on their banners. Even the Dominion's strongest warriors would lower their voices when speaking of it. The galaxy had seen many weapons, many battles, and many wars, but none carried the same weight as the warship that fought in silence and spoke only once. Its message was clear, its meaning unforgettable. To every tyrant and every oppressor, the same words now echoed in their minds: brace yourself, because a human warship is incoming, and nothing will survive. The ruins of the Dominion fleet drifted in silence, broken ships turning slowly in the cold void. Fires still burned inside shattered hulls, and metal groaned as wreckage collapsed into itself. Survivors floated aimlessly, their faces pale with disbelief. They had seen what no one had believed possible. A single human warship had crushed the might of an empire, and nothing had survived its fury. From that day, the warship was no longer a rumor. It was no longer a whispered tale told in the dark corners of taverns and marketplaces. It had become truth, carved into the galaxy with fire and steel. Every survivor carried the memory of the battle in their eyes, and their words spread faster than light. The name of the warship passed from lips to lips, from systems to systems, until even the most distant colonies had heard of it. Among the enslaved worlds, the legend grew into hope. Miners who had labored under Dominion chains for generations began to whisper of freedom. Farmers who had given their harvests to alien warlords started to believe in rebellion. Children, who had never known a life without fear, played games where they pretended to be the Black Warship, saving planets and burning tyrants from the skies. Hope had returned to the galaxy, and it carried the face of humanity. For the rulers of the Dominion, the legend became a shadow they could not escape. Even in the heart of their empire, far from the battlefield, the whispers reached them. Generals spoke more carefully, their voices no longer filled with the same confidence. Admirals looked over their shoulders during meetings, fearing that the shadow of the warship might suddenly appear above their worlds. The Emperor himself sat on his throne in silence, claws tapping against the armrest, as if waiting for the moment when the black ship would arrive for him. Alien leaders of other empires reacted differently. Some grew afraid, questioning if they could be the next to face humanity's fury. Others saw opportunity, wondering if alliances with humans might protect them. And some felt respect, realizing that the species they had dismissed as reckless and fragile had built something that changed the balance of power in the galaxy forever. The galaxy was shifting, and the warship was at the center of it. But for humanity, the ship was more than a weapon. It became a symbol. To the soldiers who fought under its name, it was proof that they were not weak, that they could stand against the strongest empires and win. To the civilians scattered across colonies, it was protection in the darkness. And to those who had lost family and homes to Dominion cruelty, it was justice, sharp and merciless. Humanity had shown that even when outnumbered, outgunned, and underestimated, they could not be broken. The story of the battle was told and retold, each version adding new details. Some said the ship was alive, that it carried the souls of fallen human soldiers guiding its hand. Others claimed its captain had sworn an oath never to speak until the galaxy was free, and so the warship fought in silence. Many believed that the ship was not just steel and engines, but the spirit of humanity itself given form. No one knew which stories were true, but all of them spread, and with every telling, the legend grew larger. On frontier worlds, rebels painted the shape of the warship on walls. In marketplaces, traders sold carvings and charms shaped like its black silhouette. Songs were sung in hidden camps, praising the warship that came from nowhere and tore an empire apart. Fear for some, hope for others, The meaning of the warship depended on who told the story, but no one denied it existed anymore. The Dominion tried to erase it. They ordered their officials to spread lies, claiming the battle had been exaggerated, that the warship was only a trick of propaganda. But their words carried no weight. Too many had seen it with their own eyes. Too many had felt the terror in their bones. The truth was stronger than any lie. The harder the Dominion tried to silence the legend, the louder it became. In quiet moments, survivors of the battle would close their eyes and hear the voice of the warship again. The deep, steady words that declared humanity's will echoed in their minds. Brace yourselves, because nothing unjust will survive. Those words became more than a threat. They became a promise, carried across the galaxy. Every tyrant and every warlord heard them and wondered when the shadow would come for them. Every oppressed soul heard them and felt their courage grow. The warship itself vanished into the stars after the battle, leaving no trace of where it went. Some said it returned to Earth, hidden among humanity's secret fleets. Others swore it wandered the galaxy, waiting for the next call, the next injustice to strike down. The mystery only made the legend stronger. A visible ship could be tracked and destroyed, but a legend could never be killed. Generations would pass, but the story would not fade. When children grew into adults, they would tell their children again. Once, when the galaxy was ruled by fear, a black warship came. It fought alone against an empire and won. It did not ask for thanks. It did not take treasure. It simply delivered justice. And every time the tale was told, the same words would follow, whispered with awe and fear. Brace yourself, a human warship is incoming. And in the vast silence of space, far from the eyes of those who searched for it, the warship moved still. Its black hull gleamed faintly under distant stars, its weapons quiet for now, but ready. It carried not just humans inside it, but the weight of their history, their pain, their will to survive. Wherever it went, the galaxy trembled, because all who had heard the legend knew one truth. If the warship came again, nothing standing in its way would survive.